And now, here's Matt Rogers and Rachel Bloom.
Well, first of all, can I say I'm excited about that Ben Platt and RuPaul's Drag Race episode of 92nd Street Y. Jeez.
Oh, that's going to be good. For the record, I would have flown out to moderate that.
I know. I'm also kind of salty about not getting the invite. Who the fuck is Ben?
Who's Ben Plart?
Who's Ben Plart? I mean, anyway, an Oscar away from an EGOT. But listen, the only person with hardware I care about right now is you, Rachel Bloom.
I don't think Ben Platt's an Oscar away from an EGOT, is he?
He literally is.
No.
I'm telling you.
What does he have a Grammy for?
He's got a Grammy for like the cast album of Dear Evan Hansen. You know, Dear Evan Hansen took him to the Emmys, took him to the Tonys. I believe a live performance of something from Dear Evan Hansen. You can really finagle your way into an EGOT. I'm surprised you haven't done your research about this.
I didn't.
As someone very capable of one.
I didn't know he was 1-0 away from an EGOT. Good for him.
Simply 1-0. And you have the big E.
Yeah, I just have an E. If you counted, well, back when the Golden Globes weren't verboten, if you counted the Golden Globes, you could say I could be on my way to EGOT.
EGOT.
But now we don't know what the Golden Globes are.
I think the Golden Globe is kind of a chic relic to have. You know what I mean? Like you may have one of the last ones. That's kind of great. It's pretty
cool. It's like it could potentially be like owning like one of those Beatles albums with a typo.
Exactly. It's like the Princess Di Beanie Baby. It's like, no, it has value. It's like having Lance Bass the doll. Remember when they said Lance was going to be the one that accrued money? Or am I the only one?
I think he still went to space, right?
Well, he certainly tried extremely hard, and we can at least say he did space simulations, which I respect. No? Come on. As someone who's so in touch with the inner child and has surely been on the attraction Mission Space at Epcot, I know you appreciate a space simulation.
I do. Okay. And then we should get in talking about the book. I know there's an audience here, but really it just feels like you and I are hanging out on Zoom. I wasn't Mission Space. Yes, it was Mission Space.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Epcot and I was in line, and there's a version I know you can do that's like more dangerous, and then there's the version that you can do that doesn't move.
Green version and orange version, yes.
Okay, so which is the dangerous one?
So orange version is going to shake you up.
I was in line for orange. I was like, I can do this. And then it was too long, so I got out of line. And I'm glad I did, because it wasn't until after them that I learned people have died on the orange version of Mission Space.
Wow.
Because of the G-forces and building up pressure in the brain, I think.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's not safe. It's not for the faint of heart or soft of brain. Now, because I've received a DM that said, yes, let's get to the book, please. Let me just say that
so boring.
First of all, this is not boring because this book is also a theme park guide. Okay, let's not pretend like this isn't part of the book. All right, Ms. Amy. So this book is so funny. It is an ode to incessant masturbation. It is a writer's room survival guide. It is, yes, a theme. It is also like sort of a tome for theme park lovers, because there's whole chapters devoted. It's so great. And I haven't been able to congratulate you on it because I haven't seen you, but it's no excuse for not sending a text. Okay. So consider this my text. Congratulations on this. It's so funny. I know you from way back. It is so beautifully in your voice, and it's just such an accomplishment. How are you feeling about the paperback of it all?
God, how does one describe their feelings about a paperback? Well, I'm feeling great. I'm doing my first in-person signing, my first probably and only in-person signing tomorrow at Barnes & Noble at the Grove.
So fun.
The whole thing has been kind of surreal because the hardback happened during the pandemic, and then the paperback, I made it super easy for myself. Instead of writing a whole new incisive chapter on mental health, I just asked fans to submit questions about Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, because that was the big feedback that I got from the book. Even though it was kind of an exploration of my relationship to normalcy, people were just like, we want more about Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. So
we want to know about the BTS.
So I, which makes sense. So I got a lot of fan questions, and it made it very easy to, it made it very easy to write an extra chapter for the paperback. But I'm thrilled you like the book, and I want to thank everyone for being here today. I see some people that I know. I see some people obviously that I don't know. And thank you to all 41 participants who are currently here.
And to the 41 participants, if you have not gotten a copy of the book, you absolutely must. And the paperback is out now. Now, I want to say this is, it's so many things, but it is a testament for me to keeping shit throughout your life, because you have your journals on hand from a really early age. Is this something that your parents were like, let's keep these around one day? Or what's the deal there with like having access to these ancient tomes, which I'm really happy visually appear in the book as well? It's really great.
I kept them with me. So I used to have my diaries at home. And then one day my mom did read my diary. It was a whole thing. And so I started bringing my diaries to high school with me. And then when I packed for college, I was like, I'm bringing these. So they've been with me. I have always traveled with my former diaries because it's my secrets. And I don't want my parents reading my secrets. And I just held on to them. There are these unbelievable artifacts of where I was. And I think in general, I like hanging on to, like in social studies, you learn this term primary sources.
Yes.
They feel like primary sources of the history of my life. And so it's also why I have AOL instant message conversations printed out.
Wow. You've got receipts.
I've got the receipts. I really like showing the receipts. And I did a show actually before my writing partner, Adam Schlesinger, passed away, not knowing he was going to die. I did this show at Largo in LA, kind of right before we won the Emmy for Crazy Ex. And we were just talking about the songwriting on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. And I had printed out all of the emails in which we were fighting about the season 3 theme song. And I just read them out loud. I love primary sources of emotion and anger.
Right. And I mean, a child's journal is always going to be that. Did you feel like in reading, I wonder what the order was. Was it you went back and found these, these primary sources, and then they sort of reminded you of certain things that then made it into the book? Or was something like your teacher telling you that you don't dress like a normal person, was that already right up here, ready to go?
It was definitely a mix. I mean, I found some truly terrible poetry that I'd forgotten about, a lot of which I didn't include. There was a particular poem that I wrote after Charles Schulz died called Peanuts in Heaven that I was going to include, but I couldn't find a way to include it. No, the teacher, there are certain foundational stories, like the teacher saying, for those of you who don't know, in my book, there's a story about I was going through what I realized was a mental health crisis in 5th grade, and I was dressing weird and cutting my own hair and was just generally weird. And she told me, normal kids don't dress the way you do. And it was this awful, and it was this awful moment in my life that was kind of foundational and was a little bit the inspiration for the book itself, because she spoke to my fear of like, I am not normal. I am not regular. There is something fundamentally wrong with me and it is my fault. And so it was a mix of those kind of foundational stories and then stuff I found in the diary. Also, I had been doing on and off storytelling shows in LA for the past 10 years or so. And there were always these kind of stories that I liked to tell that felt very good and meaty. And so that's kind of also what I put in the book.
Yeah, I was really struck by that story about your adult teacher saying this, because you articulate something that I think is really important, that as a child can drive you crazy, which is that when an adult voices something, it is then canon. It is fact. And I think, I don't know about you, but I was told from a very early age by my parents, like my dad looked at me one time, I had a question about something, and he looked at me and he said, anytime you ever have a question, you ask me because I know everything. And I remember it sort of trickled out to, teachers and other adult figures in my life. Well, they know everything, so this can't be wrong. But then when you have those formative situations where you recognize these people as being purely human, it can really mess with you. And it's a cause for a little bit of anger, I think, because when you do trace back something that's formative, and you talk in the book about how that was, a serious kickoff for you, in terms of, being self-critical and even being self-hating at times, it's tough to not be able to tell that person, hey, fuck you.
Yeah, you can't tell that to here because you're raised to, first of all, respect your elders, but also, yeah, every adult, no matter how in retrospect, stupid,
Yeah.
is always gonna trump your point of view, unless you're like a really disrespectful kid.
Right. But it's just interesting how those things, because it honestly, like, in talking about shame, which so much of the book is about, fixation on things that you're ashamed about, and you connect that to your OCD, and I think in a way that really does spell out what obsessive compulsive disorder is, because I do think, like you talk about in the book, we have so many people out there sort of saying, oh, my OCD won't let me leave the house without my keys, like you really do spell out and articulate what obsessive compulsive disorder is, and it is for you just a retreat of shameful thoughts and a need to purge those shameful thoughts, and that becomes a fixation on those things. And I just thought, yeah, not to say the book triggered me, but I did find myself going back to those formative moments, and oftentimes they are, those odd moments where you feel like this person shouldn't be saying it to me, and I'm going to develop a complex based on it because I know they're right in this moment.
Yes, that's the worst insult, right? Is when someone confirms something you secretly think about yourself.
Exactly.
If someone's like, fuck you and your purple hands.
Yeah. You're like, huh?
You'd be
You're
like,
sick.
what? I don't have purple hands. It's why, and I talk about this a little bit in the book too, but it's why internet insults, there's a reason. I was reading an article there, like, comedians, comedy sets are being ruined with people calling out their haters. And part of the reason internet stuff hurts so much is that the person's not in front of you.
Right.
All it is text, and you can project anything you want on that text. That person in your head could be the smartest person in the world. You're like, well, they must be smart. They're writing to me on the internet. Or worse, they're like everything you actually fear about yourself. And I actually think it's why reading internet comments hurts more than personal face-to-face insults, or even like voice-to-voice insults. Yeah,
it's tough.
But we were talking about, it's interesting, these terms like OCD, anxiety, and depression. I talk about it a little in the book, about how these words, they're not exactly how the things feel. They're ways to kind of, I think in a good way, pathologize,
right,
so that therapists and doctors can use them as like a diagnoses, or just tools to help you feel better. But like, whenever I've experienced what you'd call OCD or intrusive thoughts, it doesn't feel like how that word actually sounds. It doesn't feel clinical. It feels like nameless and visceral and terrible. And so when people are like, oh, I'm so OCD, I have to have my car clean. Just so clear. Oh, you've never actually you don't even know what OCD is, but I understand why you don't, because OCD doesn't sound like what OCD is.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it is. It's interesting. And when you describe depression as a graying, it's like, yes, that is what it is. But the word depression is now, we have it in lexicon, and it's, I guess, up to us to learn the real definition.
Right.
I really, and just not to dwell too much on this, but everything about the middle school and high school experience was so beautifully drawn. But I find myself really drawn to your discussions of your college years. Now, everyone out there watching might not know this, but Rachel and I we didn't cross over at our sketch group at NYU called Hammer Cats, but you were sort of a legend because you were one of the directors of the group when I joined the group. And so you had graduated. I remember you came back for a rehearsal one day.
I was at your audition, and I was at your audition too.
You were at my audition. Yeah. Wow. Which honestly will be in my book when I talk about how I code switched to try to make that work. But I really, in your talking about sketch comedy in terms of framing it in your college experience, I think I always thought to myself, Rachel Bloom, she was studying musical theater, and then she discovered this passion for sketch comedy and started to committing to sketch comedy, and then was able to blend the two. But in reading the book, it really wasn't that simple. It seems like, the experience of doing musical theater or trying to start a career in musical theater at a conservatory program at NYU was actually kind of harrowing and difficult. And I wonder if you can color that in.
Well, Oh God, it also goes into mental health. I had defined myself solely by my abilities. I had no sense of self-worth outside of my abilities, and that relates to a whole bunch of things in my life. And so when I got to school, I knew in my head there would be kids more talented than I was, but I didn't know it. And to actually be around that when you're insecure and your self-worth is defined only by your talent is really hard. And then simultaneously, I also was like, wait, is a lot of musical theater terrible? as
that
I started
creeps in.
as I started to actually study it, like, academically. And then I on a whim auditioned for this sketch group, and I started to instantly fall in love with sketch comedy. I mean, I've never fallen in love with something quicker than writing sketch comedy. And I think that what it did was it gave me a format to not only see how to write sketch, but also how to see the world. And this fundamental idea of, this is going to be really insular, but game, which is basically this term really coined by UCB, but also taken from Improv Olympic, this idea of what is the pattern of what's funny in your sketch, in your scene. And you can see that on a macro level. I started to kind of see it everywhere. Like Breaking Bad is a dramatic game. It's him going from Mr. Chips to Scarface, right? That's in one way, it's like a giant dramatic sketch. You could see the world that way. And I also think it's something I've recently been not dealing with, but I was recently kind of diagnosed with ADHD, which doesn't negate anything else, intrusive thoughts, anxiety. It all kind of goes hand in hand with that. But because of the way my brain works, I really like structures and I really like formats. And it's why I have always been attracted to satire writing, because it's a structure and a form that I can then break.
Yes.
And so I just really fell in love with sketch comedy. And then as you read, and I don't know if you read, but the interesting thing, and it's funny, there's someone in this in the audience right now who was my friend while I was going through this, but basically I got in a love triangle.
Yes, it's
with
well drawn in the book.
With the guys who basically ran the group. It's a long story, and they were my mentors, but they were also kind of hitting on me. And I was 19, and I was just, I was confused. I was also a selfish 19-year-old. And it wasn't like I wasn't even dating one of them for a long time. It was just all this drama. But as a result, these people who'd been my mentors at like a fundamental stage of my life turned on me. And I was supposed to be the director of our sketch group Hammercats. And as punishment for basically getting involved in this like 3-man sketch group they had, I was removed as director of Hammercats.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you knew me as the director, because what then happened is I was assistant director. And it wasn't until basically senior year that I got like bumped back up to be director, because they knew that I'd been kind of demoted for a fucked up reason. But I was thinking about that. And, there used to be, but there still is this culture of comedy that's very like fit in with the bros, like straight.
Absolutely,
like guys.
I remember it well.
Yeah, you get it. Like, it's why I wrote so many sketches that would end with like a gun going off or like someone showing their dick. That was the kind of culture of comedy. And I think had I not gone through what I went through with my mentors hitting on me and then turning against me, I might have been very like unfeminist in my comedy writing. I feel like because there's a certain type of woman in comedy who very much is like, I hang with the dudes and sees other women as very much a threat, even though she wouldn't admit to that. And it's
very much born of that time too.
Yeah.
Like we're talking like 2008, 2009, like it was road driven.
Yes, exactly. Like it didn't help you to be friends with other women. And in fact, when you were going up against another woman for a sketch or to be the one woman in the sketch group, you got nothing from being friends with women. And like, that experience of watching these guys that I'd idolized turn on me and be like, never mind, you're a fucking whore.
Yeah.
It gave me the energy to be like, wait a second, maybe they're not right about everything. And I mean, a little bit of was then me being like, well, fuck you, I'm going to do my own thing. But like, I was like, what if I did start an all-female sketch comedy group? And I kind of tried to do it and no one showed up to the first meeting. So that was really sad. But there is still this duality in me that like, there's always the part of the back of my head of like, it's like a song I want to write that's like, do the Loud Boys like me?
Do they think
Yeah.
I'm funny? I want
the
the
loud
loud.
voice
I want
like
the
me.
loud boys to like me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the part of my brain that's like, well, but fuck them.
Fuck them.
They're
You know what?
limited in how they see the world.
When I was reading that chapter, I said to myself out loud, I was like, I really wish we had crossed over in the group, because I honestly think that I think we would have made a great team, and I missed
I
you by
agree.
1 fucking year. But I also went on to become the director of that group, and it was hard. Like, when I, even just for me, a gay man, like I genuinely feel like my growth as a gay person was slowed by the fact that I felt the need to be a boy all the time. You know, oftentimes there was violence in my sketches that I would never ordinarily like fuck with in my comedy or in anything I would write, but I knew that it would get attention. And so
Right.
when you are someone that's an other in comedy at that time, it's tough. I mean, because you actually don't find your voice because you are writing to something else. And I thought that was really sort of vividly drawn out. And it sucks that you had to go through something that was, you know, we can say sexual harassment. Now we are not scared to call it what it is in order to be pushed to find that voice. But you also talk about rejections driving you. And so I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that, because then you speak a little bit later about a very difficult writer's room experience, you know, basically pushing you towards being who you were going to be. And all of this led to Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which feels like a distillation of you with a capital Y.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you could speak about those rejections a little bit.
Well, the writer's room experience is interesting because I was very mindful in my book of not writing about anyone's identity.
Like a fuck you book, right?
I didn't want to name names, right? And you
Exactly.
could technically name names. If it's factual, you can name names. I didn't want to get anyone semi-canceled. So what I'm going to say is going to be frustratingly vague, but let's just say something I didn't say in the book is there was social overlap between my college love triangle experience and my first writer's room experience.
And that's
Those weren't
frustrating.
necessarily distinct groups of people. I'm not saying there was like direct overlap, like one of the guys was there, but I'm saying, let's just say there
But
was.
the town is small, let's say
The
that.
town is small.
Yeah.
So the two actually are kind of linked in my mind, even though one of them is romantic rejection, or not even romantic rejection. One of them is, I guess, romantic revenge, and the other one is being the only girl in an all-male writer's room when I was 23 years old.
Right.
But the reason there's overlap is feelings of shame, feeling that the arbiters of what's funny, which are older men, I'm not passing their test,
right,
for whatever reason, and being voiceless. Because in college, the thing that happened with these guys was they kind of had like a sketch group together, and they made it so I was told when I was removed from the sketch group in college, please don't tell the rest of the group, it's going to cause mayhem. And I was
don't say the truth.
And I was so self-hating because it was like my fault. I like basically lied and said that I quit being director because I couldn't handle it, which was humiliating.
Terrible.
I was like, and then I was like, the fear of God was put like, don't say anything to anyone. You've already fucked up enough. And then similarly in this writer's room, I couldn't defend myself because it was a bunch of little microaggressions that bullies do. Like no one was ever like, shut the fuck up, woman. It wasn't that. It was these microaggressions where like I'd come in wearing a hat that I liked and they'd be like, nice hat.
Yeah, tiny little things.
She's wearing a hat today. I can't hear you over your fucking hat. That's one example. But I did remember writing in the room one time, I want to dissolve. And I wrote it in like red pen, like I was 13, but I couldn't say anything because I felt it was my fault. I was like, well, if I were just funnier in this writer's room, deep down, I was like, this is me. They're just giving me what I deserve, which is like, I'm not funny, now that I'm like, yeah, I was 23 years old. I had one spec script I got hired on. They should have been my mentors.
Of course.
I was younger than everyone in that room. This was my first job. I was the only one in the room. This was their first job. Like how lame of them to punch down. Like I was such an easy target. And I'm sure they saw me as a threat because I got hired for the job so young.
Right.
I'm sure they were like, well, you know, fuck you. I'm going to bring you down and show you you're not so great. But I I couldn't fight back. I'm not, and I talk about this in the book. I've never been good at insulting under duress.
Right.
My brain doesn't really work that way. Like if I feel compromised, I don't like lash back. It's just not who I am. And so I was a really, really, really easy target. And I knew I was an easy target. And the more I was in that room, the worse at writing I got.
Absolutely.
Although I got better as a writer outside of the room, like I didn't learn nothing. It was actually because it was such a competitive room, I did get better as a joke writer when I wasn't in the room.
But delayed. Yeah. In the moment, it didn't feel like you were killing it because these guys seemed to be made of this bullshit you had to deal with, and you did not speak that language.
I didn't. And I think it just, look, I'm sure there have been times where I made people feel small. I mean,
You ran a college sketch group. I mean, come on.
I'm sure, and I'm sure there were times that I played into the guys and maybe made people feel small.
Totally.
When you're really punching down that hard,
yeah,
boy, that's real pathetic.
Yeah, I think it was really like sort of, cathartic when you go on a podcast years later, say your experience, and one of the writers reaches out to you and wants to feel like a good guy. And you get the opportunity to be like, hey, I just want to tell you something. You're not going to get that from me because you weren't a good guy. You have an opportunity to be a good guy. Maybe you're even a good guy now. But it is that thing of, it's never too late to change or start like creating an atmosphere that's positive, because something that you say in the book, and you sort of just said again, is that you are not someone who's super skilled at writing under duress or under the gun or in a super stressful situation. And I completely identify with that. My first writer's room experience was also stressful and toxic. And it's difficult to feel good when you leave a situation like that. And I feel like it's just such a marked difference from when you actually are operating in an environment that is positive and conducive to creativity and not literally closed down and shut off. And so I would imagine that was something that was important to you when you get to the position where you are, the leader of a situation like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. So I want to ask you about, because it was a very expedited process of the show is going. You talk about not being quote unquote ready for that, but how did you become ready for that and get ready to not only be the number one on a call sheet of a show, but also have your name on there as a co-creator and really be the face of a network?
I guess like the answer I come up with is like, there was no choice. It's like either I did it or I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
So you kind of do what you have to do unless you're hospitalized, I guess. And I came close. Like there were some times I got really sick a couple times.
From working yourself to the bone?
Yeah. I had like the flu, and I had to do kissing scenes with the flu, which I hope is a thing that's over now. I hope that we can, no matter how big the budget of a production is, that we can account for, hey, if you're sick, you should stay home.
Right.
My friend Seth Green did a guest spot on Crazy Ex, and he was really sick. Yeah. He had like a bad flu, and he's like, and he called me the day before. I was like, Rachel, I'm really sick. And I was like, you're cast. I don't think we can cast someone else in time. And so he worked like really, really, really sick.
Yeah,
and
I think people don't understand
that. I feel bad about that. I feel it's production, and also capitalism is fucking unforgiving. Like Aline, my writing partner, and I, we were watching the Billie Eilish documentary, and there are moments in that where she's having a like breakdown. She's having a Tourette's episode, and I'm like, you need to not go to Coachella. And her mother doesn't stop her, which okay. But Aline was like, that's the relentlessness of capitalism.
Absolutely.
All of these people are counting on you. All of these people paid money. You can't let them down. And I just feel like that's kind of what a lot of this stuff in production is brutal. It's really, really, it's really hard. And it's because time is literally money. And I'd like to think the pandemic is giving us some perspective on that, but
and the awareness about, IATSE, everyone stepping forward and sharing their stories about that type of thing. Because I really don't think, and you know what's funny? Recently, Ellen Pompeo from Grey's Anatomy stuck up for Katherine Heigl about, I remember Katherine Heigl was quoted years ago. Actually, she wasn't even quoted. She was on television saying it, but she was on Letterman being like, I'm going to say this and I hope it embarrasses them. I worked an 18-hour day or a 20-hour day. And she, of course, was characterized at the time as an ungrateful actress. How dare she complain? But really what she was saying, and what I think more people need to be saying, is that is an insane workday. And it's not just her, it's people hanging lights, it's people holding boom, it's people working in offices. It's really tough. And I think that when you are, the number one on the call sheet and the co-creator, and you're answering to demands for that schedule, and also seeing people work for you, that has to be stressful, and it has to really change your perspective on a lot of this.
It absolutely does. And I also think I'm in production now on this new Hulu show, and I'm not number one on the call sheet, I'm number 5. So there's a nice release to that. And I'm just acting it, and I didn't write it. But I now have a kid. And so I'm really noticing how brutal production is, because okay, I get to work my call time 7 a.m. Say it's a normal 12-hour day. For me, it's a 13-hour day, because the 7 a.m. call is for makeup.
Yeah.
So I don't see my kid.
Right.
If it's 7 a.m., if it's a normal 12-hour day and it's a 7 a.m. call, which is already ass early. So I'm actively trying to think when I'm on another show where I'm number one, what am I going to do? How am I going to preserve my health and sanity and like be able to put my daughter to sleep at night? It's really made me, and the thing is, so actors come in, if you're a woman, you come in an hour to an hour and a half earlier than what's called crew call, which is when the crew is called.
Yeah.
But if you're a hair and makeup artist, you're there a half hour to an hour
early.
before the actors.
Mm-hmm.
It is really relentless.
It's tough. Yeah, I never really understood it as much as I did when I been working on these last 2 projects, which are now coming out. It's really a rigorous schedule, and the companies are interested in keeping those budgets down, and like, so that means like getting the days, and they are long. So it's a little tough. I do want to just ask before, because I still can't get over it. You just said, you're a mom now. I haven't seen you since being a mom.
I know,
Last time I saw you,
it's gotta be so surreal for me to be like, I'm a mom.
yeah, but you know what though? Like, I know you since college, and the last time I saw you, you were about 15 months pregnant. Like, this is right before the pandemic. I saw you.
When did I see you?
Well, I saw you at CBS. I came in for something.
Of course. We can say what you came in for.
I was reading for a pilot that you were producing, and yeah, it was a blast. And I remember, I remember 2 things about that. We realized in that moment that we were both Disney people.
Yes.
Because I went on an improvised run about Disney, and you were like, "Hold on a second."
I remember this.
And it was very much like right before we started this Zoom, where they were like, "Okay, guys, we need to move on. You need to stop talking." It was like, you need to get out of the room. People are waiting to audition. But I was like, we were so excited about Rise of the Resistance and what it might be. Which, by the way, I'm sure you've done it at this point.
Oh, it's great. I mean,
it's so good.
It's a game
Production
changer.
value. We love capitalism now.
Yeah, I know. It depends on what it is. I'm rarely against capitalism, but like I'm a Disney whore.
But you're a mom now.
I am.
What the fuck? Like, how is it? What's the everyday of it? I mean, how are you doing and feeling and being?
Well, we're 2 years in.
Yes.
I think here's what's interesting is it's always changing because the kid is always changing. So the experience that I have with her now is different than a year ago, because we have, there's general like getting her ready for bed, and we have a routine, but like she is changing as a person every day. So there is never settling into, there's somewhat of a routine, but you have to always be flexible with
malleable
who they
to
are and what they want.
Right.
Being with your kid, it is a hyper presentness, especially when they're a baby and they're not giving you as much, but you want to be hyper present with them. It's like, I would say it's akin to like directing on set, where you just have to be kind of hyper present all of the time. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's really hard. And I'm someone who has help, and it's still really hard.
Right.
So the other thing I'm figuring out is the balance again of how much am I working? How much am I away from her? I don't just take, like, I had an offer to do like a smallish part in a film, but it's shot in Savannah for 3 weeks. And I was like, I
don't know.
don't think I'm going to do it. Like everything now is a debate. Whereas before I would have been like, yeah, I'm not doing anything. And I've lived my life so with like, take the gig, do the gig, don't let anyone down. This is the first time something has trumped me letting people down. I mean, that also includes, I'm really not public with her. Like, I haven't even said her name yet. Like, my husband and I have had long debates about this, and we're like, yeah, let's just keep her off the internet kind of for as long as possible because AI is creepy. And so, like, there are so many ways I could, for lack of it, like, whore out my experience as a parent. Like, if I were willing to like take a photo shoot with my daughter, you know, and do a whole thing, like there's so much more I could be doing with showing my daughter's face and putting her front and center. And the fact that I'm not doing that is really one of the first times in my life that I have maintained a private life,
a boundary.
It's the first time I've said boundary.
You know what though?
For me, it's weird, but it's really nice. And it helps clarify my values. And
Absolutely.
No, getting attention and getting applause isn't the only thing I'm worth. I'm also worth protecting my child and being a mindful parent. And it's an ongoing debate, and it is still hard not to. There are some videos I have of her. I'm like, I would get so many likes.
I know.
Oh, it's so hard not to post this. I mean, there's one video of her when she's 8 months old that I'm still like, I may post.
When your baby's a star, it's harder. You know what I mean?
Really
when your baby's
hard.
a damn star, it's hard to keep him back.
So cute.
You get why the Barrymores pushed Drew out in front. You know,
you absolutely get it. But it's an ongoing debate. My husband and I are writing a movie right now where there's a character, Lil Baby Prudence, and we were like, well, we're obviously going to cast our daughter in this.
We know a girl.
Talk to me in 6 months when I've like put her in a movie and I've, fallen into that nepotism. But
yeah, and you're in charge of her availability too. So from just producer hat.
She is tech not avail. Just that privacy alone, and not everything being opened up for everyone else is new to me.
It must be too, because you are someone who, and I think I identify with this as well, and I think a lot of comedians do. Transparency, the honest hard truths are what's funny, and B, it endears you to your audience. I mean, I think that probably a lot of people in this chat right now, and certainly a lot of people that follow you, really appreciate and maybe needed the honesty and the harshness of a lot of your work. And Crazy Ex-Girlfriend certainly did not shy away from the realities of what it means to experience mental illness and everything that goes along with that. So but it is important to remember Rachel and then Rachel Bloom.
Yeah, I moderated a panel about a year ago. It's actually how I met my current therapist. She's one of the therapists in this panel. And I moderated this panel on mental health in the industry. It was like, and someone asked, when you have trauma in your life, when do you know if it's okay to share it and write about it? And someone said, when you've processed it. And so I think that's important to remind everyone always, that like whenever a comedian or a writer shares something, or I would say most of the time,
most of them,
all these headlines, so-and-so opens up about their struggle with blah, blah, blah. They're not opening up for the first time. They've told many people in their life, they have processed this, and now they have decided to talk about it on a more public scale. And so I think just always keeping in mind, anything I'm sharing is not like, I've processed it and I've thought about sharing it, and it's not a raw nerve. And there are things in my life that I haven't shared because they're things that I haven't processed, or things that I don't want to talk about, or things that implicate other people that frankly aren't, my business to share.
Right. And all of that is a process. You never know
Yes.
when you'll arrive at feeling like it's the right time. I want to transition to taking some questions from our lovely audience, because they are asking them. This first one comes from Anu. Anu asks, she says, first of all, I want to thank you for the wonderful live show you did in my hometown in Huntington, New York at the Paramount Theater. By the way, I'm a Long Island boy here, Anu. Okay, I'm from Islip, so shout out Huntington. Anu asks, are you going to do a one-woman show on Broadway? Because you totally should. And that reminds me, I know that you were working on The Nanny with Adam. Is that something that's still brewing? And what are your plans for the stage?
Nanny is still happening. It's a slow,
Love
writing
it.
a musical is a slow process. We are circling in on a new composer. Writing musicals is a very slow process. I have a bunch of other stage ideas I want to write. It's just a matter of prioritizing. I have a whiteboard with like lists of priorities. I have a special I'm working on right now. So I've been doing some live shows in LA to workshop this special that I eventually want to hopefully perform in some theaters before filming it. The goal is to film it. So that's my main focus for this year, is this special.
Love that. Yeah, I mean, this might have been one of your first one-woman shows. Was I saw your UCB Spank. I remember it was paired with Nicole Shabtai's show.
Oh, you saw Sing Out Louise.
I saw Sing Out Louise, and it was
that was my
classic
first
you.
musical. That was my first musical sketch show.
Yep, I believe you sang Seasons of Love, but in Klingon.
Correct. Correct, I did.
So Rachel's always been Rachel.
Yeah.
And speaking of Rachel being Rachel, I want to ask this question. Kaylee Walsh asks, I am also a Disney whore. Hello from a cast member in Orlando. Shout out. You're doing the good work. I know it's a tough time right now. We'll all get through it. A fun question. What's your favorite ride?
Probably Indiana Jones in Disneyland.
It's pretty classic.
It's really good. It's just really good.
I in the book, you discuss sort of realizing the concept of death during a ride on the Haunted Mansion.
Yes.
That really happened. That's really when
That's when I realized I was eventually going to die, was on the Haunted Mansion. Yes.
And they say it's supposed to be funny, but I'm sorry, when you're a child, there's still ghosts, and you're still asking that question of how did they become ghosts, and the only answer is death. And then you're a kid walking around the park, and no turkey leg can help it.
Correct.
None is savory enough. Okay, so another question from Kaylee. What are your favorite ways to decompress mentally after a bad brain day or a stressful day? What do you do for self-care when you're doing so dang much? So in those moments where it feels really overwhelming and you need a space, I know you talk about meditating in the book, but what are those coping mechanisms that you have?
I take a bath and I read. I do a crossword. I really have gotten into doing crosswords. I sit around.
Sometimes doing nothing really helps.
And I just like to be calm. I mean, when I'm on the road, like back when I was touring, basically sitting in the bath and either reading the newspaper or watching something on my laptop, like on a counter.
Right. Yeah. In a space it's not really a TV. It's something I'm doing for now.
Yeah, I really like the bathroom in general. The bathroom just calms me. I think because it's the one place that is like unimpeachably, that's private.
Are you someone that goes to the bathroom during parties, even if you don't want to go? I'm a haven seeker in the bathroom. Major.
Yes, it's too much. Someone needs to do something about parties. I mean, I guess we did, and it's called COVID, but they're just too much.
They're too much. They're so much harder now after the pandemic too, because one thing that the pandemic revealed, at least to me, was how much I absolutely love being alone and not out. And I think we both identify as extroverts.
Yeah, we do, but it's just a lot. And there's something it's an extrovert thing. It's also an ADHD thing where at a certain point, your brain just gets overheated when you're focusing on too many things, and you just need to like chill. It's why alcohol was invented. Alcohol was invented for people to cope with mass gatherings.
There you go. And prohibition was really just it was made by an extrovert who was too much. I mean,
or someone who wanted to stop all the parties.
That's true. Listen, I have another question here. It's this. Emily says, hello, I teach neurodiverse kids. What is something that you wish your teachers would have done to make you feel more supported at school? Now, remember, it's been many, many years since we were in elementary school, middle school. So I'm sure there's different things, but is there anything that you can identify from that period that you wish was different?
God, I mean, mental health wasn't like neurodiverse. I'd never heard.
Yeah, so much. It's such a different world.
You know, I don't think a teacher ever really took me aside and said, you seem upset. What's wrong? I don't think anyone ever, maybe it was because my school was too big. no one ever checked in with me emotionally. I can't recall a teacher ever checking in with me emotionally. It was always, you're not doing, you turned this in late, or I'm mad at you for something, or you did a good job, you're doing outwardly a good job. I never really felt anyone genuinely cared how I was doing emotionally, because I was very clearly emotionally troubled, especially in middle school. And I think teachers aren't trained to do that. And I don't know, teachers, at least when I was in school, weren't trained to do that. And I felt the same way in college, actually. I don't really feel that anyone was like, are you okay? And so I guess I don't, I don't know if that's a neurodivergency thing or something every kid needs, but to just someone to check in about how you're actually feeling. I never had a single adult ask me that.
That's
Never.
really interesting. And it's you also discuss, when you did see your first therapist as a child, it's like even the therapist, someone who was trained in this when you were a child, sits you down and asks what's bothering you. And just even that question, I think it's too much to wrap your head around. So I just think it probably has so much to do with where we were at as a society when it came to mental health issues. And
I just didn't
the good news is we've come a long way.
Yes. And I think that, like, I mean, if someone had just been like, hey, let's talk, and I want to let you know this is between us and you're safe.
Right. Yeah.
No one ever came close to saying that to me. And I also grew up in Southern California, where I felt like an alien for many reasons, but also for having problems or having anger. People just gave me blank stares. I associate a lot of growing up with just a lot of
inability to relate,
but also inability to have the words to describe unhappiness in Southern California, I think, specifically.
That's interesting.
I just never, I think also because I'm such a show pony, I always wanted to make people happy, like a jester or whatever. And because of that, I didn't feel like anyone cared to know or love who I truly was.
Right.
And I'm honestly still going through that process. But I mean, I've been with my husband for almost 14 years. Like, my husband loves me for me. And I felt like he was really the first person to do that, to actually, yeah.
Hesitance, but also the confirmation.
I have other friends who've come around.
Right.
But I think like that settling into the idea that I didn't have to always like perform for him.
Right.
Or sing for my dinner, that I could just be myself and have my flaws and he'd still love me.
Yeah. Rachel Bloom and Rachel.
Yeah. But there was I guess just checking in. And it's always the extrovert. Also check in with the extroverts. I think the introverts get a lot of check-ins. I think I was good-ish in school. Like, I think it's important for every teacher to check in with every kid.
Well,
and
that's why they say check in on your strong friends. You know what I mean? Because sometimes that the weakness comes when they're exhausted because they've been exerting so much physical, emotional energy that it seems like, oh, this person has to be on top of it. But it comes in many different forms. So I love that. I love checking.
Yeah, that extroverts and show ponies, their biggest fear is letting people down.
Absolutely.
So they don't want to show the sad, gross parts of themselves because they're like, well, that's not entertaining anyone.
Yeah. So Jill asks, I am on the autism spectrum, and while you are very normal, I relate to your feelings of being different more than a lot of actual representations of the spectrum. You humanize the disability community, and mental health conditions do count in your show more than other creators. How do you do it? And thank you so much for giving me a show about disability where the disability is not the punchline.
Yeah, thank you. Personal experience. I think that we always knew Rebecca was going through emotional and mental issues. And then I had, I'll be vague and say, I'm not borderline myself, but I had intimate experience with borderline personality disorder. So it was something I I knew about before going into the show. So I had an empathy towards it. I mean, I think that the key is like empathy and empathy for your characters. And if you don't have that personal experience, you know, getting someone on the writing staff who does, or if nothing else, getting someone to speak to the writer's room who does. Something I really learned, if you're writing on a TV show or a movie and you're part of the Writers Guild, you can say to the Writers Guild, I'm writing a show where someone's on the autism spectrum. Who can I talk to at a nonprofit about the autism spectrum? Who can I talk to that will read my script for free? So when we had a character come out as bisexual, there's a rep at GLAAD who specifically deals with media representation. And we had him just read over the script where Daryl was coming out and be like, okay, I'm gonna flag this. And he's like, this rings a little false. Like, and so I think like just maintaining empathy or understanding for your characters. And if you feel like you're othering someone, just taking a beat. And I think a lot of people just don't do that.
Yeah, so it's not only a thing of A, it makes the show better, but B, there actually really isn't an excuse because there is a guild you can go to that can point you to resources.
There are so many if you say a nonprofit, any nonprofit, I'm writing a thing. Is there anyone I could talk to at your nonprofit about this thing I'm writing for representation? I can almost guarantee it'll be like, absolutely. The head of the organization is going to talk to you. Can I send you a script and get your thoughts on it? Like I think most places are really down with that.
Yeah. We actually just got a question from Katie, which I also would love to hear the answer to. Well, I have a question, says Katie. Huge. We love an announcement of the question. Right. What excites you about the project you're working on right now that you have coming up? You mentioned the special and the Hulu show. Are there aspects of those projects and the different roles you're taking on in the production of the stories you're telling that you're particularly excited about? You know, the themes of what you're doing or what the projects are about.
Yeah. I mean, I think the special it's very much exploring, without giving too much away, my relationship to death and understanding mortality. I have a sketch show that I'm waiting to hear about if it's going to get ordered, but that's all about basically female pleasure, which is something is kind of been a bucket list thing of mine to do both a sketch show and to talk about pleasure more. And then the Hulu show I have with Aline is very, without giving too much of that away, like first of all, it would be something that she and I would co-show run, which we didn't do on Crazy X because I had to be on set all the time. So this, well,
yeah, you had a lot of hats already. So co-show running would be
it would have been really hard. So this, we can actually I can write and then film and then edit. It's also in the action genre, which I haven't really done before. And
hell yeah, that's awesome.
And is I would say, to be vague, is about identity as a woman in ways that we dipped our toes into with Crazy X, but didn't fully. So I think what I try to do is with any new project is what do I want to say about the world? What is there something I maybe haven't said about the world that I want to say?
Totally. That's so cool to be in that position.
Yeah, it's cool.
It is. I mean, I will say we're about to wrap up, but in reading the book and hearing about the ups and downs that came right after school, really, when Fuck Me Ray Bradbury popped off, and then you got the success of Crazy Rich Asians and the Golden Globe and all of it.
I wish I had the success of Crazy Rich Asians.
Oh wait, what did I say? Crazy Rich Asians? Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
I fucking wish.
Crazy Rich Asians. No, you weren't involved in that, and that's good. Well, can I just say, just not any shade. Okay, imagine this all falling apart in the last minute. What I meant to say was that you always had such grace, and you always made us so proud. I remember watching the Golden Globes that night with Bowen, and we absolutely freaked out, seeing you up there representing us. And I remember we put it on our Instagram stories back when that was barely a thing we knew how to do. And you've always made us so proud. And I continue to be so proud of you and so happy for you and everything that you're doing. And, I'm really, really honored to be able to do this with you. And I hope everyone, checks out I Want to Be Where the Normal People Are, which is in paperback now, which makes it way easier to carry around. You know what I mean?
Very true. And also, I hope everyone checks out Matt's new Showtime show, as well as the movie Fire Island, which comes out, I think, June 3rd.
June 3rd, and I Love That For You starts streaming this Friday on Showtime.
I mean, you're a big deal. You were a real get for this talk, and I'm very excited we got you.
Well, I'm certain that's not true, but I am certain that you are the best and funniest. And thank you so much to everyone. Thank you, 92nd Street Y.
Yes,
This was a
thank you.
damn blast, and I'm kissing you all back. Mwah, 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 mwah. Thanks, guys.